Hi, this is the Urban Lady Prepper. If you are curious about living the van life and going nomad, then this episode is for you as I interview Shonda Sinclair, who lives it. She goes into the why, how, and where. So take notes. I did. Hi, everyone. This is the Urban Lady Prepper, and today I have another special interview with another very special person. I am on with Shonda Sinclair. She is a writer, a blogger, and a podcast host on the Old Man's Podcast, which is where we initially connected. They were kind enough to invite me onto their show, and we had a very good rapport, and she had mentioned something very interesting about being a nomad, doing the van life. And I was very, very interested in that because that's something that I haven't touched upon at all. So without further ado, I'm going to let Shonda introduce herself and we will get into it. Go ahead, Shonda, do your thing.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Yes, I am a Monday morning co-host live on the Old Man's Podcast, and I originally had a small podcast of my own that I've kind of let go for now. And I write at shondasinclair.com, and I do a newsletter called Roaming the Road of Life. And I have a writing group called The Writer's Road. So I'm all about the road and movement and the journey of life.
Awesome. Well, I have some questions for you because I'm sure with everything that's going on now with finances, with rents and mortgages, just housing, the housing situation in general, there are people out there either by choice or by circumstance might find themselves making that decision. Okay, I'm just going to have to get in whatever vehicle I have and get on the road and stay there until I figure it out. Knowing your experience with it, I figured we could just get right into it and you can explain a little bit about it. What was the catalyst? What made you decide to do the van life?
I have always wanted to travel, and I couldn't because I was stuck to a job. I was raising kids, I was stuck in a particular area. And when my youngest child turned 18 and didn't want to live at home anymore, it opened up the possibility for us. And we needed to make some changes financially. And we just decided we were going to give it a try. We're going to go nomadic for a few years and see how it went. So I got to do it, but I also, there are so many thousands of people who have to do it. And I've met so many wonderful people along the way.
Okay. And when was this that you decided to get on the road?
Well, I think like so many people, big changes happened during the pandemic. We already had the plan in the works, and we lived through 2020 and we had started planning this in about 2018 or 19. And we finally made it happen in 2021. So we let go of our house and we bought a travel van. Well, we bought a van and we turned it into a travel van. And we bought a small pull-behind travel trailer. It's a vintage 1963 Aristocrat lowliner, a little 13-footer. And mostly what that gives us is kitchen space and seating. And then we made bed space in the van.
Now, how did you modify the van? Was it just like your standard van that everybody thinks of, or was it a particular type of van? And what is the ballpark of what it would take to make a regular van into something someone could live in for months at a time?
Well, for us, we didn't do huge modifications that can't be put right back because we weren't sure if we wanted to make it permanent, or we might want to resell the van later, and we don't want to make any modifications that might endanger insurance coverage, and there are so many considerations. But a lot of people do a cargo van purchase, which is already set up to be more of a commercial type van with something built in the back. You buy an empty cargo type van. ProMaster is a big one. Sprinter van is a big one. A lot of people are doing the Chevy Express, and you can do a full tiny house type build and turn it into an actual RV. And if you can do it the right way and you have the right skills, you can actually get your vehicle turned into an RV designated vehicle with the DMV. They send out an inspector and they just inspect all of your build. And if you have all of the right specs, you can become an RV.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Didn't even think that was an option. It's like either it's a van Oh, now that I think about it, isn't there a classification for vans that have certain sort of livable modifications without it being an RV, like a Class A, a Class B,
There's a
perhaps?
class C usually is what they fall into, and those are considered an RV.
Oh,
But I would say the vast majority of people who are living van life with a self-modified vehicle don't get the RV designation. It's possible, but like with any kind of administrative thing where you have to jump through hoops and get inspections, it's difficult and expensive to do.
okay. So, how long did you guys stay on the road?
Well, technically, we've been nomadic about 3 years. We are still not completely stationary. We are temporarily stationary again because we needed to move back toward where some family was and help out with some things. So we are sort of stationary at the moment. But what that really means is RV park stationary. And so we're still living in a temporary conveyance, but we're stationed RV park stationary right now.
Now, do you think that you'll be getting back on the road full time anytime soon, or you're just kind of playing it by ear for right now, depending upon what goes on?
I actually have the travel bug. I would love to make it full time. I'd love to do the circuit and do work camping if I needed to. A lot of people will stop for a month or two or three or, a couple of seasons, work in a particular area, stay stationary there. And then when the season's done and that next thing, my aunt and uncle did that for 24 years when I was a kid, and I always admired the lifestyle. My husband is already tired of it. So I don't know. We'll see where we go.
I'm sure there has to be a certain amount of mindset to deal with what I would think would be claustrophobia. And even though you're traveling and you're meeting all these different people and there's this constant newness, that there has to be still that feeling of isolation because your family's not right there, or your friends are not right there. It might not be so easy to communicate with
Yes.
them depending upon the connectivity. What would you suggest to someone, either by choice or by circumstance, keep themselves together while they're moving around and realizing that it's just not the same as being stationary?
Yeah, there are really two types of nomads right now. I mean, there's an even bigger stratification, but basically there are the ones who are stationed where they can't really go anywhere because they have to be at a job and they have to stay in an area. So they tend to travel in a regional way and kind of circle the area. They will stay in one place, for a day or two or three or a week as long as they can. They move several miles away and continue this circuit. Others, like we were able to do, are digital nomads, where they may have a completely remote job, which I did, and they can go. So we were able to travel 14 states. And that does make it somewhat difficult when you're away from family for an extended time. And there's a completely psychological element to going nomadic. You have to prepare. And we had 2 or 3 years of planning to prepare. We had 7 months of downsizing personal property to prepare. And you have to decide if you're going to keep certain personal property in a storage unit if you ever want to come back, or if you ever want to settle back in and still have those things and not have to rebuy them again, or if you plan to just chuck it all and stay nomadic. A lot of people have no personal property except what they carry with them. So it's dependent on what your goals are, what type you're going to be engaging in, and how much prep time you have, whether you can wrap your mind around all of the things that it needs. But it definitely requires mental fortitude and some definite planning.
Was it difficult for you guys to sort through what was important, or did you find it was easier than you thought to?
Oh my. You know what? It's interesting. That was very difficult, but I was so mentally ready for this adventure that I was the one who was more tossing things. I learned a little trick many years ago because I tend to be a saver. I'm a nostalgic person. I still have a binder of things from high school and junior high. I have my junior high journals. I've been journaling most of my life and I have most of those. So those I did not get rid of.
Mhm.
Those are the things, even if you don't take a storage unit, those are things that people often will leave in a family member's garage. You know, can I leave a box or two with you? These are my most treasured mementos. So those I didn't get rid of. But I did take photographs of everything I got rid of. I mean, not all the clothes and stuff, but everything that was something with a memory attached, but I knew I didn't have room in my life anymore to hold on to the item. I took photos. And I can go back and I can look at that 7 month span of time, downsizing, and look at all the photos of all those things. And you get the memory back. There are a few items that I wish I'd kept and didn't, mostly like a book or, you know, a vase Christmas ornament from when I was a kid. I got rid of those. And sometimes I think, oh, I'd like to hold that again. But if you take photos of all of it and you're mentally prepared, I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know. That's a great idea because I can be nostalgic about some things too. And every time I've had to move, which I've had to do, unfortunately, for the last, couple of years, I just feel like I've done nothing but move and it sucks. And I still have stuff in places and it's just it's a hot mess. And there's definitely some tchotchkes and things. It's like, well, I really don't want to get rid of this because I got this from this place or I got this from that person. So I
Yeah.
think I might incorporate that idea because that's one way to keep the memory without having the actual item taking up space and be something else to dust, which is kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at.
Right.
Question that folks might immediately say, it's like, okay, I've heard about these nomadic folks. I've seen these folks on TV that are buying these huge RVs and they're just, there's retired people that are just traveling the country all the time and live in their RVs. How do they handle the address issue? How do they handle the mail issue? Because I'm sure that's
Yeah.
the first thing. That's one of the first things that I thought of. It's like, okay, not that I miss junk mail because I sure wouldn't, but there are certain things you do have to, and then there's certain things that you need a permanent address for your taxes, for voting, for those kind of things. How
Right.
did you work that out?
People handle it different ways. There are a couple of ways to do that. You can just officially be a member of a family member's household. You can say, look, I'm going to technically I live with you, but I'm going to be full-time traveling for a bit. And a lot of times people will use that. They'll use a parent's or siblings, family member, or some other family member's household.
Okay.
If you are knowing that you're going to be full-time and you're really not going to batten back down to stationary place, a lot of the full-time nomads, especially the retired folks who are in Class A motorhomes, will get a residency, domicile residency with South Dakota or another state. Sometimes Nevada is good, or Arizona. There are certain states that you can go and have sort of a mobile address or a less permanent address and be allowed to have driver's license and mobile mailbox service. Those are really big with the nomadic community. You can pay an annual fee and you have a residence address post office box that is a physical address, and they receive your mail. And then you can choose whether they forward it to you by postal mail to wherever you are at the time. And you can pick it up general delivery at a local post office. Let's say I'm in, Quartzsite, Arizona is a really huge one for nomads in the winter. If I'm in Quartzsite, there is a mail receptacle place there that deals with nomads all the time. And I can have my postal mailbox delivery service from South Dakota send my mail down to Quartzsite. I know I'm going to be there several months and I'll just take the physical mail. If I don't want physical mail and I don't want to deal with, I don't want to have to try to retrieve it from wherever I am, then you can have them just open your mail and they scan it to you and you can digitally receive it by email, and you never have to deal with the physical mail or receiving it or where it needs to be delivered or any of that.
Oh, that's great. Now, was it courtside, like basketball, Arizona?
Uh, Quartz like the rock and site like a place. Quartz site.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's just outside of Yuma. It's about 45 minutes outside of Yuma in southern Arizona. Actually, probably about 30 minutes straight down from Lake Havasu. People might know Lake Havasu more than they know Yuma. So yeah, between Yuma and Lake Havasu.
Okay, because when you said Yuma, the first thing I'm thinking about is the movie. I have no concept where it actually
Yuma, yeah.
is. It the 310 the Yuma, whatever that was. That's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, yeah, I have no idea where that is. So thanks for that.
Yuma is a border town where a lot of the retired nomad community go down into Mexico during the winter to get their medications, to do their eye doctor, and to do their dentist and some other medical things. And so there are border towns down there that they can go to, and you can go through Yuma to get to one.
Okay, and that brings up another question that I didn't think to ask, especially for single moms if they're traveling with children. If they need to get medical care, how have you found the medical treatment on the road, especially if you're going into another country? Do you find that the care is comparable? Is the pricing that much better, or is it just a matter of convenience? Because I know sometimes things that are convenient that's supposed to be cheaper kind of aren't, because they know that it's a convenience thing and that you're paying for the proximity.
Well, I would say personally, I think that the border town of Algodones, which is where the one near Yuma where people go, is pretty safe, even for a single person with kids. And if I were in that area in a lower part of Arizona, I would go down there if I could. I have had dentistry in Mesa, Arizona, and it was amazing. And I have unfortunately had to have a tooth pulled because I'm getting older and sometimes things go wrong up in South Dakota, in Sioux Falls. And that dentist was amazing. So I haven't had any trouble with traveling. It depends on what kind of insurance you have. And at the time, I didn't have any. So I was just self-paying anyway. And I didn't have any trouble dealing with that. So.
You ever have to do any sort of medical care or know anyone who's done it over the border? Do they give you a hassle if you're American trying to get medical care in Mexico as opposed to just staying in America to get it?
No, they want it. They have entire border towns that are set up for US, they call it medical tourism. They are set up to receive you and they want you there, and they cater to the American medical needs population. You actually pay a little bit more in the border towns because they know that you're bringing US dollars down.
Because it's still tourism.
Yes, but you're paying about a third or less of what you would pay here. I have a family member who got a full set of dentures there for $1,000,
Oh,
and
geez.
here you're paying 6 to 10.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, extractions there, $150 to $200 instead of 5 to 7 here. So there, and eyeglasses, you're going to pay 75 to 150, where here you're paying 3 to 6 if you're using bifocals, or if you have like progressive bifocals, they're 650 here.
Oh.
You can get them there.
You're looking at mine. It's like,
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
do I have this right now? No. Do I need to see? Yes. So,
Yeah. And you can bring a certain amount of medications back with you. Every medication there pretty much is over the counter. You can get antibiotics there without any prescription at all. And I hesitate to say this because I don't want them to ever stop allowing that freedom. It's so strange that there are certain freedoms in Mexico that the people there are more free than the free United States. So you can go and get the medications you need. You can get muscle relaxers. You can get your antibiotics. You can get vitamins, of course, and lots of other meds. You cannot get level 1 narcotics, so you can't get any opioids or any pain meds, but you can get all your other stuff. You can get your diabetic medications. You can get a lot of those things. And people go twice a year because you're only allowed to bring a certain amount back. So a lot of people go 2, 3, or 4 times a year, and they get the amount they need for that many months, and then they go back again. They plan it around where they're going to be and when.
well, financially, that's a big deal. I mean, especially if you don't have medical coverage, it's probably cheaper to plan to get your medication a couple of times a year than it is to pay for it here. So I can see where that could be a thing.
Yeah, the travel to get to that border town is cheaper probably than what you're going to spend on the rest of your medications at your regular pharmacy.
Wow. Okay. And that brings me to another question. We talked briefly about the LVTAs, where people they want to be long term, because I'm sure that's another question. It's like, okay, well, with all the limitations that people place on nomads, whether, by choice or by circumstance, it just seems like they're only on the West Coast. Is that true? Or is there anything Midwest or going east like that? Because I didn't see anything.
I don't know of any long-term, it's LTVA, long-term vehicle access, and it's on BLM land, which is Bureau of Land Management land, which is federal land that we all own and we are all allowed to use. It is public land, but it is managed by the federal government, and there are rules and there are permits to be, to purchase for the use. And so in Arizona, New Mexico, certain areas, probably Nevada, there are long-term vehicle areas that are set up for nomads who go down, snowbirds, who go down for the winter and spend their money in those areas. So the towns like this travel that comes in, and you can spend, they just raised the price, and I don't know what the new price is, but historically it has been about $180 for a 7-month permit. So with a 7-month permit, you can stay, usually people come October and they leave in April, and you can stay on that long-term vehicle area. It's dry camping. It's not with amenities. So that's where the prepping comes in. You have to know how to boondock, they call it, which means you have to know how to camp in your vehicle, your RV, whatever your conveyance is, without sewer hookups, without water hookups, without electrical hookups. And people come prepared to do that.
Because I saw, just looking at the Bureau of Land Management, because I was just nosy, but I did notice that not all of them were the same. Like some were like, yeah, we have this amenities here, and other ones were like, no, we don't have this here. So it is kind of, no pun intended, a crapshoot, I guess, what
Yeah,
you
yeah.
up at. You had mentioned too, when we talked briefly before, about self-contained. So
Mhm.
I don't think that people would know the difference between the two. So if you can explain what that actually means.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't actually answer your question. There aren't, I don't know of any BLM long-term vehicle areas. I don't know if there are any as far east as Texas. Um, I do know that a lot of nomads travel down to the southwestern United States for wintering, especially the ones that are not stuck to a stationary place. And your next question was, I was going to try to answer that last one and I forgot. What did you just ask
Oh,
me?
when you go someplace and they don't have the sewer or water hookups,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
they call it
Okay.
self-contained, I believe.
Right, right. So in the long-term vehicle access areas, you're required to be self-contained. And sometimes the self-built vehicles are not self-contained in the way to meet that requirement. And that means basically that you have receptacle for black water waste and gray water waste. And they usually want you to have a certain gallon capacity for that receptacle. And you have to have a receptacle that can be properly dumped in an RV dump station. So the long-term vehicle access areas have dump stations, and all the vehicles staying there are required to regularly dump their waste in the proper dump station. There are nomads who manage in different ways, and they do properly dump, but they don't have that self-containment, and they don't get to stay in the long-term vehicle areas that have certain regulations.
For someone who's like, okay, self-contained, does that mean that I need to have a toilet in my van if there's no restroom at that facility?
Yeah, well, so bathroom habits are a very big topic in the nomadic community. And I think it's one of the things that make people turn their nose up at nomads and at the lifestyle, because if they don't have a proper, quote, toilet, what are they doing? And one of the biggest resources for people who haven't ever done this lifestyle, or who don't know how to get into it, or don't know the answers to these questions, is Bob Wells, who started this lifestyle 20 some years ago out of necessity. He's one of the main people that you see in the movie Nomadland. Nomadland actually used real nomads in the movie. And he started a nonprofit called Homes on Wheels Alliance, short HOWA. And he also started an annual meeting in the desert called the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous for all the rubber tramps out there. And they meet every year in Quartzsite, and they have lectures. And they talk about these things, and they teach people how to use a camp toilet. So for some, a camp toilet means the bucket with a toilet-shaped lid.
Okay.
And then how do you turn that into a proper receptacle that can be properly disposed of? And so for solid waste, you can buy the blue liquid you use in a camp toilet or in your RV
The same
receptacle.
stuff that you would see at the porta potties.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
you can use that blue liquid if you have a little camp toilet that has a 2.5 gallon receptacle, and it's a little self-contained 2.5 gallon thing. You use that, and you put your blue liquid in, and you go dump it in a porta potty, a regular bathroom, or a dump station in any of those places, because it's a smaller amount and you're allowed to put it in, the regular porta potty or other bathroom places. There is a powder that you can get to basically desiccate your solid waste, and it turns it into just powder.
Huh.
And then you can dispose of it in a regular receptacle like anybody would a diaper. Elderly people go in their diaper, or children go in their
Right.
diaper, and those end up in the landfill. There are ways to nullify the effect of that waste with this poo powder, they call it, and it is created and designed to turn that into just a inert powder. So one of the ways that
Yeah, that's probably a much more. That's probably an option. People going, oh, okay, that might make that a little more bearable.
well,
That
and that actually, for a prepper standpoint, that is something that everybody should have, even if that's not your normal method. Um, what happens if you are in a prepping situation, like the people right now in, the path of Hurricane Helene find themselves, and they don't have a proper bathroom, they don't have all of those things. If they had a bug out backpack with this poo powder in it, and they, were able to use their little travel shovel that's in their backpack, and they need to go in a hole in public, in the woods or wherever, you put a little powder down in there, you cover it up, and it's good to go.
and I don't have that, so I have something else to put in the bug out bag. So thank you for that. And I'm sure that's another issue for folks who are just used to having a toilet, because I'm sure we'll watch some shows like Building Alaska or something like that, and they're like, yeah, we're going to put up our outhouse, and immediately you're like, ugh, an
Yeah.
outhouse. The last time we heard of outhouses, especially if you grew up like mainland US or in any sort of suburb that has running water, that's something your grandparents did, or maybe your great
Yeah.
grandparents did. And, there's all kinds of outhouse jokes, watch for snakes and all kinds of stories.
Right.
Yeah, that's something else that, as far as mindset, that you're not going to have those bathroom comforts that we've gotten used to.
Well, it's interesting how we impose the rules of modern civility and society on everyone. And if you don't have running water and a bathroom, you are somehow a substandard human being. And I actually think that I told you when we were talking once, I would love to challenge every person to live nomadic for 6 months with no resources, just on your own, figure it out, prep what you need to prep, and then live the lifestyle and learn how unimportant a lot of our modern conveniences are to the history of human beings. And you learn as a nomad to get very comfortable with your waste and how to manage it, and also with your water use. It's funny. We knew some people who did a small campground, and it was in the Midwest, and they were required to have 100 gallons of water per person, per camper available, in running water.
Mm-hmm.
They had to have the capacity. The county, and this is pretty standard all across the US, they figure that a person uses 100 gallons of water a day.
Yeah. I mean, and
That
I know you've listened to some of my stuff. I'm huge on water. And I know that there has to be some people who listen to how a household can literally just go through 100 gallons in a day. So,
that's insane.
yeah,
And you know
people
what we
don't
use on the
realize.
road? I know. You know what we use on the road?
Mm.
1 gallon per person per day.
And that's what
Now,
I tell folks to do in an emergency. And I'm like, that's just not enough. It's like, do you realize how much you reach for a faucet? Hand rinsing, cooking, bathing, your pet,
yeah,
drink.
well, but right. And
Gallons is
so
a lot.
from a nomad standpoint, what you learn, and the reason I think this is an amazing lifestyle for learning prepping,
Mm-hmm.
you learn to wash your dishes with a spray bottle. You don't need all that running water.
No.
You spray your dishes with most people use vinegar, but you can have 2 drops of dish soap in your spray bottle, a 20-ounce spray bottle, and that will sufficiently wash your dishes. If you wash them right away and you don't let the food dry and cake on,
Mhm.
you wash them, you dry them, you rinse them with a separate spray bottle, you wipe them dry, and they're done. You don't have to douse them in gallons of water, and you don't have to have a running faucet. But that's a very unpopular thing. It is so important, I think, for people to learn.
Well, water
Uh,
conservation, absolutely in general. And as I keep harping on, we have to because we are running out of fresh water. So the sooner folks can store it and get used to using less of it on a daily basis for minor things, the better.
yeah, yeah. You learn that you really don't need a shower every day. I know that's another unpopular thing.
Yeah,
So, I hate to keep bringing it up, but we have this huge disaster that just happened this weekend
right.
from Florida all the way up through, North Carolina. There are towns devastated. There are towns wiped out. It did kill people, and it's just devastating. I'm very, very connected to this disaster. I have family in North Carolina who were not affected, thankfully, but there are people without a town, without a shower, without a house, without these things. And one nomadic person that I know of, who I'm connected with on some of the groups, said, "We're in the area, but we were able to drive away in our full-time nomadic vehicle that we use. We boondock all the time, and we're okay because we have Starlink internet, we have our self-containment, and we have our solar, which we keep our power, generated by solar." They learned that in their nomadic lifestyle through these years of doing this. And now in a disaster situation, they are not going to be as affected
Right.
because
I
they
mean,
know they don't need a shower every day.
right.
They
It
know
just
how to
didn't
clean
change. It
themselves.
really didn't change what they were doing. They just had to get out of there. But other than that,
Right,
it
right.
didn't change their day to day living.
Exactly. They changed their location, but they're staying actually on the fringes to volunteer to help.
Oh, that's awesome.
Um, but yes, they know they have everything they need for their life with them. We call it turtle shell home, basically. You carry it with you. It's not homelessness, it's houselessness, which, there is a difference. And they carry their house with them, carry everything they need. They're not as devastated. Now, the problem is going to be gasoline. They can't necessarily re-gas up in a place that can't receive gas, where the roads are closed and the gas delivery can't come and
And
the gas station was wiped out. Then how do you get your gasoline to move around nomadically? That is
just want to,
where
yeah, and I just want to interject really quick because just like some people don't realize that the chicken they get in the store is the chicken that's clucking on TV, there's folks out there that haven't put together that if the power's out, you can't pump gas, even if the station has gas in it.
Exactly, exactly. And as a nomad, you can't carry enough gas to get to perpetually travel.
Mhm.
The hope would be that, the whole of the world doesn't fall apart at the same time and that you can move to a different location and find places to get gas. But that I think is the biggest detriment in a vehicle nomadic lifestyle, the need for gas in at times when it's not going to be available.
And I would think probably the second thing is finding places to dock. And I know we spoke briefly about California, how you have folks that might, have a nurse that might be making 75,000 a year and she can't afford a place to live. So now she's living in her car or in her van. And
Yes.
of course, the people who live there are just like, well, we don't like these people camped out on our street. So would that be the second after gasoline? That would be the second biggest challenge is just finding a place to be,
I
especially.
think so, yes. Especially if you're not in an area where you are on BLM land and you're allowed to be there. There is the stealth, in the nomadic community, there's big discussions about being stealth. And that basically means you don't have stickers on your vehicle, you don't look like a big travel vehicle, you don't probably carry your travel trailer behind you if you're trying to stealth. And you can just blend in places. Now, I do know that some hospitals and other medical facilities are having lots available for their travel nurses and travel medical professionals to actually be allowed to park in a hospital-owned lot.
And
And so
that's
those
great.
people,
That's a great
yeah,
byproduct of traveling nurses. That's helping the
yeah,
nomadic community event. So that's
it is. But more and more communities are cracking down because there is a quote homeless crisis. And while that's true, I do think that people should be allowed to assert their human right to travel and live in a nomadic way if they choose to. The problem arises when we have this intersection between forced homelessness that probably resulted from drug addiction, alcoholism, or mental illness. There is a lot of that. And those people are not equipped to manage properly. They're not equipped to be self-contained, and they're not equipped to not make a mess and not be a nuisance. And those are the kind of the face of homelessness that you see in all the towns and the tents and the human waste is on the sidewalk because they don't have a place to go and they don't know how to properly dispose of it.
And now you can go to jail for just
Yeah,
not,
and now, yes,
which is crazy.
The Supreme Court of so there's a big deal, and Grants Pass, Oregon just got on the map, on the international map, actually, because they had a big homeless problem. And the homeless people there were the tent homeless, were there living in a couple of the parks, and then here and there on other public areas. The Ninth Circuit out of Idaho, a handful of years ago, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, I forget what year it was, ruled that people who are homeless have an innate human right to sleep. And if they don't have a place private to sleep, they must be allowed to sleep on public property somewhere. And cities could not criminalize homelessness for people who have no other option.
Right.
And I mean, people get all political about it, conservative versus liberal, whatever. I like to leave the whole politics out and just look at the human aspect of this.
Absolutely.
People need a place to be, and people need a place to sleep. And so the Supreme Court the Ninth Circuit, which is a lower court than the US Supreme Court, ruled that you have a human right to sleep in public if you need to. Well, it wound its way up and up and up into the US Supreme Court, and Grants Pass took it there. And so the US Supreme Court has basically wiped away that prior Ninth Circuit ruling. And I'll tell you, the Ninth Circuit is one of the most overruled and changed circuits because they tend to have some what people consider out there rulings, and then those get overruled later. So the US Supreme Court has basically wiped away that Ninth Circuit ruling by saying that municipalities can police homelessness and they can force them to move along and they can give them citations for sleeping in public.
Right, like they can pay it, like they can afford to pay a fine.
Exactly. And so all that means is that they end up with failure to appear notices in court. They end up with fines they can't pay, which makes them now have criminal issues because they can't pay the court and the state the fines that they are owed. And then they end up with misdemeanor jail time because they don't have any way to manage to pay these fines. It's a ridiculous way to manage it, and it spills over into the rest of the nomadic community because not only now are these people who have no other choice, who are the lowest of socioeconomic strata, who are struggling to just survive, not only are those people now being criminalized, but the next level of it, which is the working houseless people, or the by choice recreational houseless people, now also are not allowed to be in public parking. I understand that in Florida, you can be arrested for sleeping in your vehicle because it's against the law in Florida to sleep in your car. And I don't know if that's true of the whole state or just certain counties, but I do know that there are people who've been arrested for sleeping in their vehicle.
That's and again, I think that goes back to mindset too, because you might have someone who has a place to live, raised within the certain culture, like, okay, you have a place to live, living in your car would never, or living in a van would never be a choice. What can you say to them to kind of change their mind that it's, like you said, there's a difference between homelessness and houselessness, and to not down on somebody who says, I choose to live this life because I can't, or I just won't, the stationary life just isn't for me. I like being on the road. I like that particular freedom or that particular lifestyle.
Yeah, there are people who like it because they just want that freedom. There are people who were forced into it, who learn to like it. And that's one of the things. I'm in a group of SUV car living group. It's 100. There are 120,000 members in this group.
Wow.
It is a marvelous group of people who share experiences and notes. And if you are traveling through an area and you aren't sure where to stay, you can put up a message and say, hey, I'm going to be in the such and such area, or I'm planning, or I'm stuck, or whatever. Where can I go? And you'll get this whole network of people who will say, oh, I know this place and that place and that place, or oh, you can park in my driveway for a week, or you can come and stay in my backyard for a week, or there are those people who are willing to put themselves out there to help. And so it turns into this underground network.
Yeah, it is what it sounds like. It seems like this very, very underground type thing, which might have an appeal on its own.
Well, it's a tight-knit community. Everybody wants to help each other, even if you are one of the, it's funny, there's a whole class structure in our society, and there is a similar class structure in the nomadic community, because there are the people, like I said, who are just barely struggling to survive, and they've got a tent and a bedroll, and they're pushing their shopping cart around town, and they don't have any way to do anything else. And then there are the Class C RV designated vehicles that cost $110,000, and those people are going to Zion, and all of they're on a national parks tour. But there is this camaraderie even among all of those strata to help each other and to share information and to give life experience that you've learned to other people, so that they don't make the same mistakes or have the same struggles. So it's really neat. It's a neat thing to see. And I know a woman who owns her own business. She's been doing the same business for 25 years, and she went fully digital nomad a few years ago, and she travels the world. In the winter, she will rent a place for a month at a time. And she's been to Greece, and she's been to Mexico, and she's been to Portugal, and I mean, all the places. And then in the summer, she comes back to the United States, and she lives in her SUV, and she travels the summer. But she works wherever she is. She does her work, and then she explores where she is. And when she tells people, I'm houseless and I live in my SUV, their jaws drop. Because she does not look like the face, quote unquote, of homelessness. She does not look like what they think of as homeless. And we've got to break the stereotype. We've got to make people understand that this is a viable, reasonable lifestyle for the day and time that we are living in.
More and more people are probably going to find themselves in that position. Thanks for listening to part 1 of my interview with Shonda Sinclair. Part 2 will be uploaded this coming Wednesday, when we get into food, community, resources, gear, and so much more on this very fascinating topic. Thanks for listening.